Gospel revolutionaries from around the world, this is Daniel Rouse. Welcome to our very next session of the 21 virtual Calgary Grace Conference. And we are hosting this in your living room, in your kitchen, wherever you may be today. We are excited to be there. Thanks for joining us. I hope you are enjoying the conference as much as I am. And I am so excited today to introduce to you our next speaker. And he is a great asset to the gospel revolution, Don Beres Bartlett. Many of you may be aware of Don's situation. He has been in and out of the hospital, mostly in the hospital, for several months after a battle with COVID. He is now currently in a nursing home, receiving physical therapy so that he can get back home to be with Laura as soon as possible. But we were able to capture an audio session of Don discussing the pseudographical writings, and I'm sure you are going to enjoy it. Sorry there's no video, but considering the circumstances, I think you will enjoy the content because it is as good, if not better, than any content that Don has given to the gospel revolution over the years. You may hear some interruptions during the conference or during his session, but that's just part of where he's living. We wanted you to just experience a little bit what he's experiencing. And of course, this session is done in only a way that Don can do it. So without no further ado, would you welcome with me, Don Beres Bartlett.
Hi, my name is Don Bartlett. I'm with the GO. I have been for a few years now. And I'm here to share with you tonight my thoughts on how the early church deviated from best practice, I suppose is the easy way to put it. To put it concisely, the early church was not your Southern Baptist church. It wasn't your Methodist church, Presbyterian church, Word of Faith church, Pentecostal church, or any church of that ilk. They didn't come along for another 1,500 years. They came along with the Reformation. There were some churches that preceded the Reformation, namely Mennonite churches, German Brethren churches, the Church of England. These all separated, quite separate from the Reformation, which Luther championed. But what my purpose in this message is this. I want to share with you some thoughts about why what we are told is simply not true. Now, I don't want to take your beliefs and laugh at them. I don't want to change your beliefs, really. I simply want to create a space in which we can examine the possibility of other things having happened that you and I were never told about. So on that basis, if you'll suffer me to talk a little bit of history, let's go. The church, as we know it, and every church around will try and claim the early church is, that's what we are. We're like the early church. Well, of course, that's just BS. It's not true, and it can't be possibly true. Can't possibly be true. For example, there are no slaves in the modern church. The slaves were spoken to by Paul, allegedly. But let's have a look at how the whole thing started. If you look at the timeline of Paul's writings, and what we're going to be doing, by the way, right now is we're going to be addressing what we commonly call Psuedographia. Pseudographia are writings in the New Testament which are thought to be forgeries or written under the name of someone like Paul or Peter, but not having been written by them. Now, there was often very good reasons for this, as well as some not so good reasons. One of the good reasons was that most of these early disciples had schools of their own or people that followed them Just as people followed Jesus, calling him rabbi, they would follow Paul, they would follow John. In fact, when John, before John died, he is said to have had a school at Ephesus, numbering many, many disciples. But they were disciples of John. If you look at the pedigree of the early church fathers, they come from John mostly, and you can look these up pretty simply. I mean, one thing Google is good for is finding out a little bit about history if it has not been rewritten. Now, Christianity is absolutely superb at rewriting history. They will tell you that no books are in the Bible except books which were written by either a disciple or an apostle, or the intimate of an apostle, a close friend, a traveling companion, a bosom buddy. They will tell you that all of the books in the Bible that we have now are books that were in common usage in the New Testament days. Now, that is just pure fiction. James wasn't even known in the early church until around 400. If books had to be written by an apostle, well, who wrote Hebrews? Now, we know who wrote Hebrews, but don't be telling that to the Roman Catholics. Don't be telling that to the Baptists. They'll tell you they don't know. Then what is it in the Bible, and why is it included using rules that said that a book had to be written by an apostle? Who wrote James? There are 11 Jameses referenced in the New Testament. Which one wrote James? And even if it was the Lord's brother, he was never an apostle. He was never a disciple. So when we go through these rules of, and of course another rule was that it had to be in common reference, or it had to be acceptable by church leadership as a teaching truism. The book had to be held in reference, or reverence, I beg your pardon. The book had to be held in reverence as a book that was worthy from being taught from. Now, recently in our podcasts, you need to have a look at the Gospel Revolution podcast. Every Friday it comes out. It's hosted by Daniel Rouse and Mike Williams. And who knows, sometimes I stick my head in as well. We've been dealing with this very matter, and I wanted to create a space to explain one possible way of looking at how the Bible evolved. Now, if you have a look at the books of the Bible chronologically, the New Testament chronologically, we start off with books like Corinthians. Paul wrote to the Corinthians, and in that he wrote that. And by the way, as I share these ideas, I understand what it's like to spend our life in information cul-de-sacs. And in information cul-de-sacs, we often were never game to put our head outside of that cul-de-sac for fear that we would meet one of those dreadful liberals or an atheist whose only goal was to stunt our belief in Jesus, to end our faith, to turn us into atheists just like them. This is what we were told. And if we weren't told it, it was certainly inferred. We start at Corinthians, and Paul says, look, do everything decently and in order. He said, be orderly about your worship. When you all come together to worship, one of you can bring a song or a psalm. Another one should bring a scripture. Another one should bring maybe a word of a word. And so in that respect, and I don't mean it in the Pentecostal sense of the word, but in that respect, it was truly charismatic. It was people exercising a gift of perception where a scripture would fit into a worship service. where a psalm or a song would fit into a worship service. And so it was one voice through many throats. Now, when we go forward 300 years, it's one voice through one throat, the leader or the pastor. But let's have a look back again at Corinthians. At Corinthians, this was one of the earliest books Paul wrote. When you get to what is accepted as the last book that Paul allegedly wrote, which would be 2 Timothy. Hello there, how are you? Oh, lovely dinner. What have I got for dinner?
Got some fried chicken with great mashed potatoes and gravy with zucchini and a pan biscuit.
Oh, honey. I feel like I've died and gone to heaven. That's wonderful. I'm recording a message for a conference coming up at the moment. So, no, don't be sorry, love. You're going to go out into a conference. It's going to be wonderful.
Well, everything is friends.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay. When we come to 2 Timothy, allegedly that was written just before Paul's head rolled into a basket. And by the time we get there, many years later, some 2 decades later, after Corinthians was written, we're talking about elders and deacons and bishops and what have you. What changed in the meantime? Did Paul decide that he was too sloppy to begin with? If there's one thing that Paul loved, it was freedom. He's the one who wrote this. It is for freedom that you've been set free. That is how the nearly inspired version puts it in Galatians 5:1, I think. But he's the one who wrote, everything is lawful, but not everything is smart to do. He was all about freedom. And the thought that Paul would have written how to become hidebound in rules and regulations is a very difficult one to swallow. 2 Timothy is a book amongst about 7 other books, which is under serious doubt by almost all biblical scholars. And that includes people who are liberals and people who are not liberals. The concept that there are books in the Bible, 2 Thessalonians, parts of Ephesians, parts of Romans. This is not a new one, not by long chalk. In fact, people as early as the 200s, just a couple of hundred years into it, said that James had no substance to it. There was no gospel in it. That Peter was not even known in the churches, particularly 2 Peter. And so, and then in 2 Thessalonians, I think it's chapter 2, we have the writer of Thessalonians saying, look, we all know that there are forgeries abounding under my name. Now, if that was not Paul, it was somebody wanting to pretend they were Paul, saying that there were forgeries in his name. If it was Paul saying that there are forgeries in my name. No matter which way you cut and slice it, that is a very difficult verse to analyze and parse without simply saying the early church writers knew that already there were forgeries in their names. What about 2 Timothy? Well, here is how I look at things. If you look at portions of books, say Ephesians chapter 4 onwards, 4, 5, 6. If you look at Romans chapter 12, 13, 14, 15, maybe part of 16. If you look at these bits and pieces, you find that they are not only entirely different than the rest of the book in cliches, in language choices, that is to say verbiage choices, in ways of expressing, in logical equational thoughts. In other words, if this is this, well, that must be that. There is an entire different character of writing. Now, this is not hard to tell. If I wrote to you, I would write to you using Australian English. And then if Mike Williams decided to insert a chapter towards the end of my writings, he couldn't help but sound like an East Tennessean. That's just the way it is. He'd sound certainly American. He wouldn't sound Australian. So there are ways and methods that we can decide whether or not a book is written by the same author as another book under the same name. So the next thing we're led to is follow the money. Follow the motivational trail. One of the things that police always look for in closing cases is a motive. What would be the motive, if any, in forging one of Paul's letters? What would be the motive in saying, look, you've got to have deacons and elders and bishops? Who would that most advantage? It's a good question. Well, firstly, it would advantage James at the head of the church at Jerusalem. Because the one thing the Jewish worship never liked was loose ends. It was all done by the book. And if James was anything, he was a bookman. He didn't die until AD 70 when he was tossed off the top of the temple by other Jews who wanted him to say that Jesus was not the Messiah. And he used to spend all of his day in the temple praying 3 times a day. His knees were so hard they called him an old camel knees. The man was, if anything else, he was absolutely sincere. I happen to believe that he was sincerely wrong. And when he and Paul in the Second Council of Jerusalem in Acts 21, and please forgive me if I'm doing this from a hospital room. I'm doing it from memory. So if I give you the wrong references, please forgive me. And we'll try and circle back later and repair that damage. But he said famously to Paul said, look at all these converts that we've been able to make amongst the Gentiles. And James says, oh, that's wonderful, but look at all the many thousands, and the word in the Greek means tens of thousands, of converts that we have made. And here is the teller. The kicker is here. And they are all zealous for the law. That was a big one, that one. They're all zealous for the law. In other words, they are all zealous for law and order. They are all zealous to have everything done by ritual. They were all zealous, which is why they wanted to be circumcised. A quarter of a century after Jesus had died, they were still practicing animal sacrifice. That's what James told Paul to do. And not only for himself, but for 4 other fellows as well. Go and buy their sheep and sacrifice them as the end of a Nazarite vow. You can check that out in, is it Numbers or Deuteronomy 14? It is all too telling. So the first people it would advantage, having law and order, would be James and the church at Jerusalem. But there is a far more insidious motive here at play. Around about the late 200s, a fellow come along called Constantine, an emperor of Rome. And you have to remember that emperors of Rome were not just emperors, they were also gods. They could write off that Jesus said, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and unto God that which is God's. But in Romans chapter 13, is it? When it's talking about all authority comes from God, that God is very possibly Caesar. And so it's important to know who is going to benefit from these new rules and regulations. Bishops and deacons and elders and everything in its place and a place for everything. But Constantine comes along and realizes that as he is joining together the East and the West empires of Rome, what he needs is a cohesive religion with a cohesive book of rules governing that religion and a cohesive guru caste administering that religion. And so to that end, he put every pastor, every priest, every prelate, he put them on the state payroll. Now, you know that your pocket is going to dictate what you say. You know that. So it was very easy to dictate what these people said. And it was very easy to insert into the Bible chapters that were never there to begin with. Chapters about, I don't know, bishops, deacons, elders. It was easy to make the Bible fit the need rather than the other way around. And so this is what happened, in my opinion. You've got to remember that Rome was a center of influence. And like most capital cities, the influence peddling was the main business in trade. And so if a little church out in Ephesus wanted to do something and install a new bishop, Rome would quickly write them and say, listen, if you install this person as bishop, we'll send you some money. Or we'll send you some adherents so that your church grows quickly, slaves that we have freed. So when we look at who most benefited from these changes between, say, Corinthians and 2 Timothy, it would have to be the church at Rome. The church at Rome was the influence peddler of the early church altogether. In fact, the Roman Empire morphed into something called the Holy Roman Empire. The name given to the emperor, every single emperor, was Pontifex Maximus. That is the name that the Pope holds to this very day, Pontifex Maximus. Rome successfully combined and amalgamated paganism with Christianity, or paganism with the gospel of James, Peter, and John. It was a do good, get good, do bad, get beat, to the point where they would murder people who disagreed with them. And in the late 300s, when the Bible was formalized, I don't say canonized, that didn't happen till the late 1500s as a knee-jerk reaction to the Reformation under Luther. But when it was formalized, the bishops that disagreed whether books should be in the Bible or not were summarily disappeared. You can see this in history. And so tender were the wounds of that time that it wasn't until another 300 years later that Rome really could put its foot down in the 6th century. 200 years later, I guess. It wasn't until then that they could take people like Origen, who were revered as a church father, and then de-church them, de-saint them, unsaint them, because they weren't held in living memory. So when we look at the reasons for Psuedographia, we cannot overlook the fact that Psuedographia exists as a result of insertions into the New Testament by people who stood to benefit from those insertions. And there is nobody alive today who can say otherwise. Now, I'm not saying that that is the way it is. I'm just saying that no one can say otherwise. I'm not saying that it wasn't done for the very best of reasons. The disciples of John didn't write 2 John, 3 John. The disciples of Paul didn't write 2 Thessalonians or try to add on to Ephesians, Colossians, and so forth. If you look through, and this is all about what is Scripture and what is not Scripture. Jesus said very clearly, Scripture was all the Old Testament, the prophets, and the law and the Psalms. And he had no idea that we'd be calling the New Testament Scripture. Or maybe he did. Paul certainly didn't. And neither did Peter. And I know the arguments that are put forward, but you've got to remember that Peter, writing to Peter after Paul's death, some 3 years after Paul's death, had the unmitigated temerity to write these words. And some of what Paul says is hard to understand. Now, that's how it's translated in the King Jimmy. But let me tell you how the Greek reads. That some of what Paul writes are the writings of a fool. They cannot be understood. They're the writings of an ignoramus. And it's just as equally true either way. So we have to remember that what Jesus called Scripture is Scripture, not what Peter called it, not what Paul called it, not what anyone called it. The New Testament is simply a commentary on the Old Testament. That's all it is, a commentary. And Paul even got it wrong at places. But where the New Testament agrees with Scripture, that is, the law, the Psalms, and the prophets, we cannot wait to embrace it. We love it. We think it's fantastic because we know that there were more minds in the New Testament that understood the Old Testament Scriptures. We know that there were people there who, and you've got to remember this, James says to Paul, you go out and into Europe and you convert all those Gentiles. Go for your life, boy. And that was a derision with which he spoke. In America, if you call someone boy, you'll get a fist to the nose because it was a derogatory expression against black people. But that's what James said to Paul. You go out and you have your fun, boy. But when we read Revelation, we read that it was written to the 7 churches, not of Jerusalem, the 7 churches of Asia. And Paul said just before he died, all in Asia have deserted me. See, it is much easier for us to believe it and do good, get good, do bad, get beat. It's much easier. It's much more human because it's not divine. It's much more human to believe that if we do someone bad, we'll get bad in return. We call it karma. But the divinity that is amalgamated with humanity, there is no pressure. There is no altar calls. There is no emotional baggage. There is no emotional bribery. There is no blackmail. There is none of that. Because one thing the writers of children's hymns got it right, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. God is gentle. And you can say that he was, he's not gentle, that's okay. But, you go convince someone else because you're not going to convince us. You're not going to convince us when he looked at the travail of his soul and was satisfied. When prophetically he said, it kills me to see what they've done with my son. But he was still satisfied. That is gentleness. Not that you and I didn't deserve worse. We just didn't expect any better. But that's what we got. I hope you keep enjoying the podcasts. I hope you keep enjoying what we share with you. And I hope you enjoy this conference. This is Don Bartlett saying, peace. Namaste.
Thank you, Don. What a great session. I hope you enjoyed that session. Loaded with information. That's going to be one that you're going to want to go back and listen to over and over and over again. Before we close out this session, I want to just talk to you about supporting the gospel revolution. Everything that we do is done because of our sponsors, because of our donors. And we just want to say, for all of you who contribute to the work that we do, thank you so much. For all of you in Calgary who have supported the gospel revolution for so many years, thank you for all that you have done. I am a living testament of what the gospel revolution does. And my story is repeated over and over and over again. I was head over heels in love with religion, the Word of Faith movement. I was a pastor, and you might say, this doesn't sound like a good testimony. You're no longer a pastor. No, I'm not. I am free. I am so glad to be free from the strains of religion and Christianity. I would not be where I am today. I am sure of it. If it wasn't for the gospel revolution, Michael Williams and Don Bartlett and so many other gospel revolutionaries. Each week we produce videos, podcasts. Twice a year we do these conferences where we put out great content. Throughout the years we have produced music and writings and books and so many different platforms. The simple thing is we're promoting a message of freedom. That is the gospel. And in the day and age that we live in, it just takes finances to do that. But we've been able to stretch every dollar as much as we can. For instance, on the Tuesdays when Michael does his Facebook videos, we've been able to just take just a couple dollars and throw it on those videos and watch 50, 60, 70. We have had as high as 100,000 people watch those videos just for a matter of a few dollars. A monthly partnership of $25 a month could really boost what we could do on Facebook. And, the equipment and the other things that it just takes. And then for us to take care of Michael so that he has the living expenses that he needs so that he can concentrate on producing this wonderful material and making sure that the gospel revolution is moving forward. So again, thank you. Let me give you a little instruction if you want to give. If you are in Canada, we have a couple special instructions for you. You can make your checks payable to Grace Conferences, and those checks can be mailed to 400-7015 MacLeod Trail South, Calgary, Alberta, T2H 2K6. Or if you'd like to give by credit card, you can call Vic at 403-686-0841. That's Vic at 403-686-0841. If you're in the U.S. or other countries around the world, you can go to gospelrevolution.com. There is in the top right-hand corner a button that says donations. If you hit that donate button, you'll be instructed with information on giving online. There is a phone number for our U.S. office, as well as a mailing address if you'd like to mail in a check. We appreciate anything that you can do, and thank you for your continued support of the gospel revolution and the message of freedom. Don't forget, we have a couple more sessions coming up. Look to the schedule, find out when we're coming online next, and we hope to see you there. Don't forget, Sunday at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we're going to be on Zoom, and this will be a live session where you can, it's a two-way session, where you can ask your questions, you can participate in the discussion, and this is always a great time. We did this last year, and it was wonderful, and we're looking forward to doing it again. All that information is made available on Facebook. If you look on Facebook and look for Gospel Revolution, right wherever this video is posted, the information will be made available there. You can also look in your email. If you are on our email list, all that information for the itinerary and such is there. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you in the next session.